Today I'm coming to talk to you about the need for stiffer penalties for impaired driving. I'm hoping to persuade you today to work with me to help reduce the losses from drunk driving by showing you how weak the current set of penalties are and by suggesting stronger penalties that will help deter first time and multiple time DUI impaired driving drivers. Did you know that an average of one person was killed or injured in an alcohol-related crash every 2.9 hours on Wisconsin roadways, according to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation? This could be you. I mean, do you want that to be something you or a family member? Um, I will talk to you about the issue of drunk driving in Wisconsin and explain the ways that we can work together to potentially reduce the toll that it takes on people's lives. My daughter recently had some girls that they knew from Girl Scouts that were killed in an accident that was caused by impaired drivers. It was very difficult to talk to her about the situation, what had happened. She now refuses to do cleanup work around our highway, and because she's afraid of the same thing could happen to her. This pushed me to look at the current penalties for drunk impaired driving and see how weak they are. It's a shame that it took three young girls' lives and a mother's life to have me look at it. But now that I've looked at it, I can see how weak it truly is as you learn the different stuff. Um, Almost everyone has someone that they know affected by drunk driving in their lives, be it a victim or a person driving, and how many of us have known someone that was probably a little too impaired to drive, that we saw drive off even though we had told them not to. In the following speech, I'm hoping to persuade you today to work with me to help reduce the losses from drunk driving by showing you how weak the current set of penalties are and by suggesting stronger penalties to better curb the problem and address the problem. Um, Current losses in Wisconsin and injuries because of drunk driving are just outrageous. Uh, we'll now kind of look at just a small sampling of the loss of lives, injuries, and damages caused by drunk impaired driving. Um, when it comes to loss of life from drunk impaired driving, sadly, in 2015, alcohol was a contributing circumstance in 190 traffic deaths, according to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Think about that, 190. Nationwide, there were over 10,000 drivers fatalities from drunk and impaired driving. Um, Injuries due to drunk impaired driving during 2015, there were 2,872 alcohol-related injuries and crashes, according to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Also, according to the Department of Transportation, estimates are that those accidents and damages cost over $400 million in 2005. 400 million. What could we have used that money for in other circumstances? With knowing how drunk impaired driving can affect you and your family, we can now see how we need to better control and eliminate it. Let's now look at the current penalties that are in place to help deter people from drunk impaired driving now that we know the impact of that driving. The current penalties for drunk impaired driving in Wisconsin are very weak. Penalties for first-time drunk impaired driving offenders are almost sadly missing. Generally, a first-time drunk impaired driving offense does not even have any jail time included in its punishment. Effects that first-time drunk impaired drivers have on others is that 95% of fatal drunk impaired accidents that cause deaths are caused by first-time offenders. Um, in Wisconsin, sadly, it's just not acceptable. Penalties for repeat drunk impaired driving offenders um, is pretty weak. Drunk impaired driving does not become a felony until your fourth offense with a minimum of 30 days in jail. And that's only if they were all within a 10-year period. Wisconsin's one of the few states that driving offenses for drunk impaired driving come off your record after 10 years. So you could have someone that has multiple first time offenses for drunk impaired driving that just continues getting that little short jail time but still has the problem. One thing they talk about is most people that have drunk impaired driving offenses have done it multiple times before they were ever caught. And I mean, this just fits that. Um, Now seeing the penalties for drunk driving and the time statutes, I can understand why more people do not think twice of driving when they are only buzzed, even though this is most likely impaired drunk driving. Let's now look at some of the harsher penalties that other states have used uh, successfully to improve their drunk impaired driving that we should potentially move towards incorporating with our current penalties. Um, Suggested increased penalties for drunk driving, impaired driving drivers in Wisconsin to help reduce losses. Let's look at first time and multi-time offense drivers and get us penalties to help us stop them. Penalties for first time drunk impaired driving offenders. In Arizona, one of the better states for this, in general, a person convicted of a first-time drunk impaired driving incident must spend a minimum of 10 days in jail with up to a minimum of 45 days in jail for a super extreme DUI, which is just involved with a high blood alcohol level. Um, if the violation involved alcohol as opposed to drugs, the driver also must install an IID which remains in the car for at least 12 months following the completion of the license suspension. An IID is just a device that they have to breathe into to verify that they're not drunk. Penalties for repeat drunk impaired driving offenders. In Minnesota, drunk impaired driver offenses stay on your driving record for your whole life. In my opinion, that needs to be in every state because why should it disappear? I mean, it's something you've done that could cause great bodily harm. A third drunk driving impaired charge in Arizona results in a felony conviction in a minimum of 4 months in jail. So, I mean, there's an actual result there, not 30 days, but 4 months. Um, in review, we need to seriously look at these harsher punishments and see how they can be utilized to further reduce the incidence of impaired drunk driving and its costs on families' lives. Now that we have talked about the toll that drunk driving, impaired driving brings to families and have seen the current punishments that are not working, I think we can all see how important it is to follow our fellow states with increasing penalties for drunk impaired driving to help reduce it before it happens. Talk to your congressman. Help me work on the problem so that we do not have to have the same conversation with your child that I had to when one of your friends or one of their friends or someone is hurt by a drunk driver. Nobody wants to have that experience. Nobody wants to have that stress. Let's achieve zero drunk driving offenses.